Hello, my name is Nathan. But it hasn't always been. For 17 years I had a completely different name, and now only one that my family and my close friends will know. Now, I may have changed my name 2 years ago, but that doesn't mean that anything changed about my mind. And this was a mind that knew that something was wrong, that something was off, and after a long time and a lot of pain, I realized that I am, in fact, male. It's gonna work. You can do it. I believe in you. Yes. Okay. So, as the term sort of transgender, which is when a person who does not identify with the gender they were assigned at birth, it's becoming a lot more noticed in the wider society. People understand it more, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're really getting equality yet. Now, it seems because our society is so obsessed with this categorization of male versus female that it means that the trans community seems so out there and odd. Now, even if we have like people who are trans who don't believe that they are the same gender they're assigned, and we have people who are cis who do line up with that, we still have a long way to go. Now, just last December, the House of Commons released a statement to say that transphobia, which is the act of prejudice against the trans community, is still underlining the income, the living standards, health, and of mental and physical of these individuals. And what's more, it goes on to say that a third of transgender adults and as much as half of the transgender young adults have attempted suicide, which is grossly over the national average. And in my opinion, that is completely unacceptable. Now, as this is going on, I thought a great way to start would be to talk about my own transition, because this is me. So, I first had these problems when I had my gender issues. I came out to my family, I came out to my friends, and I was 16. 16-year-old me. So I went to my GP. He didn't really understand anything, bless him, but he didn't really get the procedure, didn't really understand the term, but he said, okay, I'll refer you on to the local psychologist. So I saw them for a few months, and they said, yeah, I think we're onto something here. So they sent me to the local psychiatrist, who gave me the actual diagnosis of gender dysphoria, which allows me to go into the actual clinic services. And that was me at 17. And I have not really changed my hairstyle since then, so not everything changes, as it turns out. So 17-year-old me goes into the clinic service. This was in Leeds. They have a little satellite clinic. And I saw them every few months. We carried on my assessments, which was like, hi, how you doing? How's life? It's like, well, it's pretty bad, but, you know, I'm going on. Can I have some help yet? No. It's like, okay. So they carried on until I was then 18, and thus I'm no longer eligible for the child services. So they referred me on to the adult clinic, which for me is in Nottingham. Now, that was about 2 years ago. So, we're having 2 years ago now. Just last year, I was cleared to start hormones, which I am now taking every 3 weeks. And hopefully within a year, I'm going to have top surgery, so fingers crossed. But I thought we'd just do a comparison of that was 2 years ago, and that's now. So, you know, hormones are pretty powerful things. Gotta love that. So, now, even this is going on, it took about 2.5 years in the service. But if that sounds like quite a long time, I have some bad news. That's actually quite fast, in the sense that I was actually quite textbook, because I have a very supportive family. I have a college that was really great. They did everything they could. And then I had my friends really kind about it. But it's just not the case for everyone. You hear countless stories of people who have merciless bullying in schools. You hear rejection from medical services. You see kicked out of their homes. So countless areas of our country are still failing the trans community. So I thought today I'd like to talk about some of them that we still have to address. So the first one is society as a whole. And in that sense, a good way to look at this is through the media that we're producing. Because if you want to know, to sort of get a feel for what we think about an issue, the media is a good place to start. And this has also caused problems because if someone doesn't know a person who is trans in their own physical life, then the next place they're likely going to see them is on the news, on TV, on the shows, or in a film. Now, this is not necessarily in its own right a bad thing, but it can be when this reflects the assumptions and the stereotypes rather than facts. One trope I personally hate is when you put a guy in a dress just to point and laugh at, or say a parent comes out as transgender and it's nothing more than a punchline, it's a joke. Like, they think they're a woman, how weird is that? So I'm not saying it's getting out there. We're actually getting transgender lives in stories, which is a great step forward. But there's this thing where they keep miscasting the wrong the actors. So I have an example here of recently, which was The Danish Girl, which casts a male actor to play a very famous trans woman who is Lily Elbe. Now, on the surface, this doesn't sound like such a bad thing, but when you think about it, they cast a man to play a trans woman. And what that very subtly is saying that is a trans woman nothing more than a man? It's a very subtle erasure of identity. And it's not that trans actors don't exist. It's not that even like masculine female actors exist. But this is seen countless times, and every time the trans community will protest about it, that you are taking our identities away. And if this is the only representation that we're getting, this is the only thing that someone sees in when they actually do meet a trans person, like what are they going to think about us? They already have such bad misconceptions. Now, the second area I'd like to talk about is the health, which is great in this country. I love the NHS. It's such a beautiful concept that we believe in equality for everyone in terms of health. But that's not to say that it's great, as you can tell from sort of the theme of my talk here. But it does. The NHS does offer help for gender dysphoria. It's very streamlined. It's very effective once you're in it. But getting a diagnosis of gender dysphoria is incredibly long. And when you look into it, you can look into the statistics and you find that it's because there's about 4,500 referrals per year into these, with a 25 to 30% yearly increase. But this is something that the system just can't cope with. This is too many people. When you look overall, the NHS says that a first consultation with any type of specialist clinic should be within 18 weeks. But when you look in one of the biggest clinics, which is down in London, the clinic waiting time can be as long as 18 months. So this is where basically the trans community is left completely helpless for months on end without any sort of help. And the fact that there's only 7 clinics in the entirety of the UK anyway, as I have experienced, because I have to go 2 hours all the way to Nottingham for a 3-monthly compulsory clinic appointment, which then means I have to pay for the train fare there and back, on top of the fact that I have to pay a prescription charge every 3 weeks for my hormones. Now, I'm a student. I don't have that much money. So paying for this is something that I'm constantly worried about. And on top of that, there's always these health cuts going on at the moment. All these budgets are being cut. What if my service gets cut in some way? Like, this isn't something that I want in my life. It's something I need to survive. Having a healthcare system isn't any good if your patients can't live it and survive it long enough to get any help. Now, whilst I'm running up and down the country trying to make all of my appointments, life is going on. So in that sense, also, I'm trying to get a good education. And I have said I've been very lucky in the sense that my college was very accepting. They really went out of their way to try and make me feel safe and really accepted. But it's not the case. The National Transgender Discrimination Survey in 2011 asked a bunch of kids who didn't identify with male or female about their experiences with the schools. 78% reported harassment. 35% reported physical assault, and even 12% reported sexual violence. 15% felt forced to leave the school due to severe bullying. Now, if the trans community can't even get a decent education without severe bullying or abuse in some way, then how are they supposed to get a good job at the end of it? And this is reflected in the statistics. The trans community is faced with twice the rate of unemployment, and for those who actually manage to get a job at the end of it, 90% will experience harassment, mistreatment, or discrimination in the workplace. It's not good enough. I mean, the fact that I'm where I am, that I'm studying a degree and I'm hoping to get a PhD, is some sort of small miracle. But the fact that it's regarded as a miracle is unacceptable. Being trans should not stunt my attainment level, and it should not limit how far I can get in the world. Now, thankfully, in this country, we do have quite a nice lot of laws to protect us. And the first time that trans people were specifically identified for protection was in 1999. And this was in the form of the sex discrimination regulations. And more recently, a very pinnacle point that came was with the 2004 Gender Recognition Act, which said that someone can be legally recognized in and gain the rights and responsibilities of their required gender. And these are massive steps forward. This is incredible for this community, but it's not universal. I mean, if you look at America, they're practically going backwards. We have the introduction of their bathroom laws, which is basically forcing trans people to use the wrong bathrooms in the states such as South Dakota, which is great for everyone, obviously. And also when you look at the very startling statistic that at least 4 trans people have been murdered this year alone, and when you look back last year, that figure was at least over 30, clearly somewhere in the law we are failing to protect the trans community. Now back here in the UK, we have GIRES, which is the Gender Identity Research and Education Society, and they were looking into this, and they think that over 39,000 people suffer some sort of LGBT-related harassment, which could be motivated by biphobia, homophobia, or transphobia. But as little as 6% of this is reported, which shows such a blatant mistrust between the community and the police force that we don't even feel safe going to the people who are meant to protect us. This trust has to be re-established, but not only that, we have to extend the law to encompass more of the community. I was looking around the Equality Act in 2010, and I found this quote that says, "A person has the protected characteristic of gender reassignment if the person is proposing to undergo, is undergoing, or has undergone a process, or part of a process, for the purpose of reassigning the person's sex by changing physiological or other attributes of sex." Now on the surface, this does sound very inclusive, and they have really tried to include as many as they can. But when you take a step back and you look and say, what if someone doesn't want to physically change their appearance? What if, because of their circumstances, they can't at the current moment? Does that mean that they shouldn't be allowed to be protected by the law? You know, it's like, where is their equality? Where's their justice? Where's their protection? Now, the final area I'd like to talk about is the one that I personally feel is very important, and that's having a family support. Because it's been highlighted, I think, best by the San Francisco State University, who in 2010 said that family support of adolescent LGBT youth will protect against suicide, depression, and substance abuse. And I myself, I agree with this. My family is very supportive. My mum will go on the warpath anytime anyone tries to belittle me, tries to downplay my severity. My parents are very supportive. They've always had my back. But it's not the case for everyone. You have the 2012 study of trans adolescents wanted to look into this, and they found that when looking at suicide ideation, which is very common amongst trans teenagers, 35% of them who did have supportive parents had thought about it. But that figure goes up to 60% when the parents aren't supportive of their identity. And if you take those same unsupportive parents of their children and you look at how many had actually attempted suicide in the last year, it's 57%. But this goes down to just 4% when you have supportive parents, which shows that you can reduce a suicide risk so substantially just by having parents that say, hey, your child is trans, it's okay, you know, that's fine, it's treatable. So, overall, I have discussed 5 areas of society that really needs improvement to come over and come together to really give the trans community equality here in the UK, which is society as a whole, health, education, law, and the family. Now, tackling one on its own would never be enough to fully give trans equality. It's one of the things you have to work together. And I was making this presentation, I realized that makes quite a little acronym, which is SHELF. So if someone were to ask me, hey, how do you propose we fix trans inequality in the UK? I say, well, it's quite simple. We fix the shelf.